This podcast is brought to you by Aetna. Learn how Aetna is working to build a healthier world by visiting aetnastory.com.
Hi, it's Doro, and I'm so excited to announce that the Achieving Optimal Health Conference is just around the corner on October 26th at Georgetown University. For our Health Gig listeners, we have a special offer. If you sign up by September 20th, you'll get $50 off your ticket. Just go to achievingoptimalhealthconference.com and use the code HealthGig. Get ready to create a happier and healthier life story. People are yearning for information, having the opportunity to encourage people and to educate people and inspire people.
It's amazing to be able to say we'll carve out time to take care of ourselves.
There's something for everyone.
Welcome to the BB&R Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Riley Cook.
And I'm your host, Dora Bush Cook.
Thank you for listening. We are so excited that we get to do this podcast and help people learn how to take better care of themselves by interviewing thought leaders and experts in health and wellness about their personal health journeys.
So we are here today with AJ Jacobs, a dear friend of Trisha's and mine. He's one of our esteemed alumni speakers from the Achieving Optimal Health Conference. He is also a serial Celebration of Readers speaker. And we're just so delighted, AJ, that you're here with us.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. This is an honor.
Well, before we begin, I think you know, AJ, that we're a company that inspires and educates people how to better take care of themselves and those they love, mind, body, and spirit. And so you have written 3 books that you say are your mind, body, spirit, self-improvement trinity. The Know-It-All, The Year of Living Biblically, and Drop Dead Healthy. So we're going to talk about your self-improvement trinity because that's something our speakers will want to hear. But before we go there, we just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I realize now that hearing that, I could have saved a lot of time and energy just going to you guys, because you would help with my mind, body, and spirit.
That's true.
Instead of having to write these books. So big mistake there next time. But I grew up in New York City, and I graduated with no skills whatsoever from college. So I decided I could sort of write a sentence, and I've been writing ever since. And I specialize in writing these, as you say, these sort of radical self-improvement projects where I try to improve myself because I need a lot of improvement. I'm a fixer-upper. So that's been my life for the last 20 years.
You know, it's your writings, your books, again, they're hysterical. They're laugh out loud funny. But the idea that you're an experiential writer, right? You experience things and then you write them, that seems to be kind of your niche.
That is true, yes, because my real life is quite boring. So I can't write about, my dad was not a spy or was not president of the United States. So I don't have a very interesting life. But I like to put myself in very interesting situations. That way I can write about them.
And what inspired you to do that? I mean, as a child, did you do that? Because what we read, you were pretty, like you said, an ordinary life, right? So what happened?
Right.
How did you do this? How did you turn into a citizen scientist?
I would say, I like that phrase.
Thank you. We just thought we would throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say that one of my, I have a lot of flaws, but one of my great strengths is that I have an insatiable curiosity. I once interviewed Alex Trebek from Jeopardy, and I loved his phrase. He said, I'm curious about every topic under the world, even those topics that bore me silly. So I love that too, because even the most boring topics like accounting, once you dip your toe in, it actually has some fascinating aspects to it. I assume. I actually haven't tried accounting, but every other topic, once you dip your toe in, you you can find fascinating parts about how the human mind works and how we can make our lives better.
And often that's so true. And often you hear people say the way they stay young is by staying curious, right? The idea of keep asking why. Everything's new to them. It's a great tool
Right.
to apply to staying
I love
youthful.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you, AJ.
totally a mindset.
It is. It's a total mindset.
So I think that's a good lead in to the Know It All, the book where you read, and I'm not sure why you did this, but you read the encyclopedia from A to Z, which I'm assuming is the mind part of the mind, body, spirit improvement trinity that you took on. So
That is true.
should we start with why the heck did you do that?
Well, that one came about. I actually got that idea from my dad because he loves reading and learning. But so he decided to learn everything in the world. And when I was a kid, he started to read the encyclopedia, but he only made it up to the middle of the B's around Bolivia, I think. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to follow in the family tradition and try to remove that black mark from our family history? So I did. I read from A to Z, and it was a wild experience. I mean, in some ways, it was great. I do feel bad for my wife because she had to start penalizing me $1 for every irrelevant fact I inserted into conversation. So I was a little bit, it was like Cliff Clavin, if you remember that character from Cheers.
Yeah.
How long did it take you?
It took me about a year and a half, and I was reading 6 or 7 hours a day. I'd read in the subway, in the on the treadmill, in the bathroom, you name it.
How much money did your wife collect from you?
Several $100. It went towards the college fund for the kids. So
That's
yeah,
good.
it was a good strategy from her.
Very good.
What was the most interesting thing you learned? If it's even possible to narrow it down to one thing from the encyclopedia, or what are a couple of the most interesting things?
Well, one thing is actually it really helped my mindset in that it made me much more grateful because I was reading about all of human history, and you realize we've got a lot of problems today, and especially in the last few months, this has really hit me. But look at the long view. I mean, we have really come such a long way. Lifespan has tripled. Whenever I feel down, I often remind myself of these three words: surgery without anesthesia.
Yeah.
Like you read about that and you're like, my God, we live in the best time possible. And even since you guys are experts on health, I don't think you do this, but I read about a very popular cure in the 1800s called the tobacco enema.
Oh,
And this was have you heard of it?
No.
Well, I won't go into too much detail, but the idea is that if you had something wrong with your body, your stomach, the one prescription was to literally blow smoke up your butt. That was where the phrase comes from. Doctors would attach a hose and they would blow smoke up your butt. And I'm like, thank God for modern medicine. We have made progress.
we can be grateful. I agree.
Exactly.
What was number 3? So we have surgery, we have the cure, and was there a third one?
Well, there was, sticking with the health theme, I thought this was interesting. The Bayer Aspirin Company invented a cure. It was a cough suppressant in 1898. Do you know what it was called? It turned out to be pretty well known. It was called heroin. The Bayer Aspirin Company invented heroin as a cough suppressant. It turned out to have some other qualities. So it had some unexpected consequences. So, that taught me just, it's hard to predict where things go. Usually, luckily, as I say, we've gotten better and things have gone right. But sometimes you can't predict.
Wow.
What was the absolute most alarming thing? Although
That's pretty alarming.
What you've spoken about is already pretty alarming.
That is a good question. Alarming. Well, I guess reading about things like the super volcano that is underneath Wyoming and erupts something like every 500 million years, and it's been about 490 million years. So hopefully we can figure out how to cork it in the next 10 million years before it blows up, because then, it basically covers the entire world with ash.
Wow.
Oh my.
So AJ, when you're reading, are you taking notes, or how do you remember these things, or how does your brain work?
Well, first of all, I have forgotten 99.9% of, so I don't remember. But I would say yes, I take copious notes, and again, much to my wife's chagrin, if you work your knowledge into conversation,
Right.
you actually remember things better. So when you're reading, I always try to talk about what I'm reading and hopefully make it interesting. Not always successful, but use your knowledge, get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's then people begin to call you a know-it-all. But
That
that's
is
okay.
right. Well,
Because then they'll buy your
I
book.
tried. There you go. That's the title. I try to give it a positive connotation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, just on a day-to-day basis, keep your mind healthy?
That's a good question. Well, one exercise I do, uh, there's a lot of people who say that the brain is like a muscle. And I think it's a pretty good metaphor scientifically, because the more you do exercise your brain, the stronger it gets. So I don't go to a gym for the brain, but I do spend 15 minutes a day, every day. I try to just brainstorm ideas. Just
Mm.
turn everything off, no computer, no iPhone, and come up with random ideas for anything, for articles, for books, for vacations, uh, for activities I can do with my kids, and I find it's very helpful because the more you use your brain, the more you're able to carve these new pathways in your
Right.
neurons, and so I highly recommend sort of a 15-minute workout. And I will say the other thing is, it's a quantity game. So 90% of my ideas, maybe 99, are terrible, and I acknowledge that, and I'm fine with that because you've got to do lots of terrible ideas to get to the one or two good ones.
Exactly. Exactly. And you touch on that really interesting new science. You're right that the brain is flexible, right? And as you said, it is fat. We can create new neural pathways.
Right.
Yeah, which is
Neuroplasticity, they call it.
Right,
So,
right.
and I'm a big fan.
Mhm.
It's very inspiring and uplifting because when people tell you, oh, you're an old dog can't learn new tricks, that's not true. And also that intelligence, you're born with a certain intelligence and that's what you're stuck with. Not necessarily true. You can do things to improve.
The next part of the improvement trinity is the year of living biblically, when you decided to live all the rules in the Bible. And so,
What was that like?
Well, it was wonderful in some parts and absolutely horrible in others, uh, because I was trying to follow them all. So I was doing, the Ten Commandments and love your neighbor, but also those ones in the Old Testament, like it says you cannot shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were. So I just had this huge topiary hanging from my chin, and I looked like Ted Kaczynski. And I spent a lot of time at airport security, and so there were a lot of rules in the Bible that are hard to follow in modern day America, like stoning adulterers. That doesn't go over so well. So I had some challenges. I did stone an adulterer. I used pebbles. That's how I got around it. But
how
it
did you
was a
find an
challenge.
adulterer?
What's that?
How did you find an adulterer?
Oh, well, I'll tell you quickly. I was in Central Park. It was the middle of the year, so I was really getting into it. So I had on this white robe and sandals and my beard, and this man came up to me and said, "Why are you dressed like that?" And I explained, I'm trying to follow all the rules of the Bible, the 10 Commandments, stoning adulterers. He says, well, I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me? And I said, well, that would be fantastic. That is such a lovely offer. And I took out a handful of stones that I had been carrying around in my pocket because I've been hoping to run into an adulterer. And they, as I said, they were small. They were like pebble size. And I showed them to him. He was very aggressive. He grabbed the stones out of my hand and threw them at me. So I thought, an eye for an eye, I can toss one back at him. So that was how I checked it off the list. After the year, I put away the stones and I shaved the beard. But there were actually quite dozens of things that I have kept that have changed my life for the better. So it's interesting, that there are wonderful things from that experience, and then things that are better left.
What left? Yeah, in the Bible. But tell us some of the things that you've kept with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, just to echo back to the one from earlier, gratitude was also a big theme in the Bible because it says to be grateful for everything. So I would be grateful. I'd press the elevator button and I'd be grateful it came. I'd get in the elevator and be grateful that it didn't plummet to the basement. And it was a weird way to live, but it was wonderful because you realize there are hundreds, thousands of things that go right every day that we totally take for granted, and that we focus on the 3 or 4 that go wrong. So that was a big one for me. Others, it was a huge challenge because the Bible says not to lie or covet or gossip. And I am a journalist who lives in New York City. So that's like 80% of my day. So I was never able to get rid of all of those, but I do think that I made progress. And I do think, for instance, I gossip less, and it makes me happier. It's sort of a selfish, how altruism can sometimes be selfish. I feel better when I gossip less. So that was a nice lesson.
This podcast today has been brought to you by Ignite Coffee. We developed a proprietary mixture of specialty grade coffee beans and an amazing blend of anti-inflammatory spices, including turmeric, cardamom, cinnamon, matcha, and anche chilies, so you can do more than just wake up in the morning.
Order Ignite Coffee at www.bbrconsulting.us. Enjoy your coffee and ignite your life. What is your religious background? I'm just curious.
Oh, sure. I grew up with no religion at all. As I say in the book, I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. No offense to the Olive Garden,
Yeah.
But that was part of the motivation. I wanted to dive in and see what I could learn about religion from the inside out. And I did have this board of spiritual advisors. So I had rabbis and ministers, priests and scholars and atheists and everyone under the sun was interpreting the Bible in their way, and I would write about and study with them.
So in that year, did you always dress like the way you dressed in the book, on the book cover, or did you dress normally? And when you went out, you put this on.
I did. Well, yes, I didn't always have the robe and sandals, but I will say there are several wardrobe rules in the Old Testament that I had to follow. In Ecclesiastes, it says that your clothes should always be white. So even if I wasn't in the robe, I wore white pants and a white shirt. And here's a weird thing. It actually affected my mood. I felt a little lighter, a little happier wearing all white because I don't know why. I sort of felt, how can I be in a bad mood if I look like I'm about to play Wimbledon or go to P. Diddy's party? And it's a very profound lesson in many of my experiments, how much the outer affects the inner, how much your behavior affects your mind. So if you act as if you're compassionate or act as if you're happy, your mind eventually catches up. It's really the whole idea of fake it till you make it is so powerful. There's a great quote from the founder of Habitat for Humanity. It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. And that really hit home with me.
Can you repeat that? It's easier to... Act your
Easier to act your way
Mhm.
into a new way of thinking
Mm,
than to think your way into a new way of acting. So
mm.
basically, what cognitive behavioral therapy talks about, that you have, even if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling optimistic, act as if you're optimistic.
Mm.
So a lot of times I remember writing my health book, and I would wake up feeling just demoralized because it's such a huge topic, as you
Mhm.
guys know.
Huge.
Uh, and huge. So, but I would act as if I were confident. I'd call the publisher and say, "Oh, when the book is released, we should have a big party and serve kale martinis." And that, and my sort of that fake confidence eventually caught up with me a couple hours later, and I felt better. I mean, even doing an interview like this is good for me because I spent the morning alone writing, and when you're alone, you have self-doubt. But
Right.
then when I talk to you guys and it's such a delightful conversation, I'm like, you know what? I guess I do have something to add to the world, and my mind catches up.
That whole idea of self-doubt or self-sabotage, how do you deal with that? How do you
Oh,
deal with that?
it is so hard.
Mhm.
And really, my favorite strategy is just getting out there and acting as if. And I also think that being alone is good sometimes, but I think that social networks are just so
Mm.
important.
Yeah.
And there's lots of research on how people who have strong social networks actually live longer. People who go to church
Mhm.
regularly live longer. And maybe it's because God hates people who don't go to church. I don't think I don't think that's the case, but maybe. But scientists think it's really because they've got this strong social network, and when things
Right.
go bad, as they inevitably do, you've got this group.
So let's move into the body part of the mind, body, spirit, and talk about the book you just referred to, Drop Dead Healthy, which you actually wrote on a treadmill desk.
That is true. It took me about 2,000 miles. I think I walked about from New York to Houston to
Oh,
make it in the bush
yeah,
Language.
geography.
lexicon. So, so
Do you still stay on your treadmill desk much, or is that one that kind of you're
I
not doing so
do.
much?
Nope,
Yeah.
I was on it yesterday. I would be on it now, but I don't want to
Yeah,
breathe
make the
heavily
noise.
and
Yeah.
alarm your listeners.
That's
you describe yourself as skinny fat. What does that mean?
Right. Well, that was my body type, and I basically looked like a snake that had swallowed a goat. It was not a good look. So just a real big tummy, and it's particularly unhealthy. Apparently, that stomach fat is kind of the worst, the one right around the abdomen.
Can you tell us
Uh,
why? Can you tell us why? Because I think the listeners will find that interesting.
yeah, it's been a while,
Okay,
so
yeah.
my
See what you
I
can.
need
And
I
if
need
not,
to,
that's okay.
but it had to do with the type of fat that it
Visceral.
was. It was. Do you remember the distinction? It
Yeah, it's
was.
visceral fat, right? So it's the fat
What's
that's like
that?
visceral fat. It's that
Yeah,
fat. Yeah.
exactly, visceral fat, and it was. So that is as opposed to fat that's, I guess, just under the skin,
Right.
and yeah, that is linked with heart problems more and lower lifespan. So, but you actually that was an interesting lesson. All these Dr. Oz
Right.
folks who try to say, here's an exercise that targets your stomach, or here's
Right.
an exercise that targets your butt. That does not work. You cannot target a body part. You just have to try to be healthy overall and exercise overall, and then your abdominal fat will go down.
Right.
But I would warn listeners to be wary if someone says, "Oh, this is the perfect one to get the perfect abs or the perfect butt." Just realize that there's not much science behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So, AJ, we often talk about bioindividuality, what works for you may not work for me, but may work for Trisha, or, And so did that resonate with you as you tried all these health fads?
That is such a great point, and absolutely. And one of my favorite books on health and diet is was a book with just that thesis, that there is no one perfect diet, that people respond differently to different diets. Um, and I will say that's why I try not to get too obsessed with saying to people, "Oh, you've got to eat quinoa, or you've got to eat, this particular non-GMO asparagus."
Mm-hmm.
I think that taking the bigger 30,000-foot view and just eating, like Michael Pollan, the writer, says, eat real food
Mm-hmm.
and not too much of it. And the one thing that everyone can agree on, there's lots of, as you say, bio-individuality, but you would be very hard pressed to find a human who would benefit from eating a lot of processed carbs.
Right.
So that stay away from the sugar. The sugar really is the worst, and the processed carbs. But once you get past that, just eating the real food is the key. And it could be, I'm a vegetarian, so I eat almost all vegetables. But I think you can have a low carb diet that is healthy. Just don't eat a lot of the processed carbs.
Right, right. As you said, Michael Pollan says, eat real food. Just eat real food.
What?
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Well, the heuristic I like to use is, someone once told me, don't eat out of the pantry, eat out of the fridge, because the fridge is where real food, good food, rots.
Right,
right. And food that's artificial and that has a long shelf life. So eat out of the fridge. Every time I'm tempted to go to the cupboard, I try to steer myself back to the fridge.
Very good.
Yeah. What were some of the weirder things you tried?
Oh, well, there were plenty of those. I mean, there's a movement called the group of people who believe that we are a nation of under-chewers. We do not chew our food enough. And their movement is called Chewdeism. And they take it to the extreme. So they say you should chew like 80 or 90 times per mouthful. And I tried that, and it is very hard because it takes like a day and a half to eat a sandwich. So I don't recommend it. But you know what? If you take away all of their excess, it's actually pretty good advice, because when you chew food, you eat more slowly. And the more slowly you eat, the better, because as you guys, I'm sure, know, it takes 20 minutes for the message to get from the stomach to the brain, the message that says, I'm full. So if you eat more slowly, you will actually eat less, which, of course, is a good thing. So yeah, I am not an orthodox Chewdeism member, but I do like a little bit of the Chewdeism. So that was just one of the many strange ones. I mean, there was a long one. I have a chapter that I am happy to skip over, because you may not want it on your podcast, but about how to go to the bathroom in a healthy way. And there's some very strong. What's that?
That is really interesting, because people don't know, and you don't talk about that. And that is an interesting, important discussion. So yeah, just let us know a few tidbits.
All right. All right. Well, I'll keep it pretty clean. But the basic idea is that we were not built to sit.
Right.
We were built to squat. And that's how we did it on the plains of Africa for hundreds of thousands of years. So now there is, on like Shark Tank, there's the squatty potty, where it's a little stool, and that's actually good. That I use sort of an ad hoc squatty potty. When I was doing the health book, I actually took it a little further, and that's when things got in trouble with my wife, because you can actually buy this device that you put over the toilet, and it's like a platform with a hole in it, and it turns your your first world toilet into like a developing nation's toilet. So it's like you're going in India. And my wife was like, "All right, that's enough. Get that out of there." Uh, but overall, yes, I am a fan of the squatty potty concept.
And that again is because it helps you not have hemorrhoids and that sort of thing, right?
That's right. I mean, it's faster. It's less strain on the body parts down there,
Right.
and saves you from hemorrhoids.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good one. This is a very good one.
So,
And
so
you know what? I have kept that. It did change my life in a
Yeah.
big way. I mean, I use it every day.
Yeah, we actually, Dora and I both have one too.
yep.
There you
It
go.
does. It makes a big difference.
It does make a difference, right?
So I read that you talk about, with regard to health, a vicious cycle versus a virtuous cycle. Do you remember that?
I do. I do. I'm trying to call it is funny. I talk in the encyclopedia book about the Ebbinghaus curve, which is the curve of forgetting, how 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 we forget information over time. So it is a little bit on that curve, but I do remember the key to me is, yeah, you can. The vicious cycle is just so pernicious because it's, you're sitting, and the more you sit and don't do exercise and don't motivate, the more depressed you get, and the more depressed you get, the less likely you are to get up and do something to take care of yourself. So that's the vicious cycle. And luckily, there's also the virtuous cycle, which is that if you can just motivate yourself to that first step, once you get on, a treadmill, even just walking a little, it stimulates the serotonin in your brain and gets you alert and gets you more optimistic and confident. And that allows you to do more and more. And then the more you do, the better mood you're in, and the more likely you're going to continue. So it is really that's why that first step is so important, and why I spent so much time on motivational techniques, which I think are almost as important as the actual health advice. Because we all know the basic health advice: eat good food, exercise a little, as much as you
Right.
can, and get sleep. But how do you motivate
Right.
yourself to do those things? So that's why I spent a lot of the book on those techniques.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good point, and really valued. You're right. How do you get motivated? How do you stay motivated when it gets cold outside?
Right.
How do you do it?
And I do. I mean, I have some tricks that still work for me.
Ooh.
One is this idea of thinking about your future self almost like a different person, and trying to remember to be kind to your future self like you would to a friend, and because your future self wants to be around. So I actually took this to the extreme, since that's sort of my job. So I went on one of these apps that will digitally age your face. So, I was about 45 when I did this, and I digitally aged it till I was like 85, and the gray hair and the wrinkles and all that. And I printed that out and put it over my desk. And I would look up every once in a while, and it'd be like, what would that older AJ want me to do? He would want me to, he wants to be around to see his kids get married and have kids. And so I'm going to try to think of him and not eat that third bag of Cheetos.
Ooh, that's
a good one.
really good.
It is and you don't need to print it out, but just try to remind yourself of your future self.
Mm-hmm.
And there are studies to back this up, that people act in healthier ways when they think about their future self. So it's not just my own crazy idea.
Right,
it's
right.
it's backed by science.
That's I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah. Well, AJ, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking the time to be with us. We're so
My
grateful
pleasure.
to you.
And thank you for all you're doing, and your wonderful company that's making people happier and healthier and the world better. So thank you.
Thank you, AJ.
Thanks, AJ. Have a good holiday, and hopefully our paths will cross soon.
I would love that. Absolutely.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us on Health Gig. We loved having you with us. We hope you'll tune in again next week. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and follow us on healthgigpod.com. I'm Trisha.
And I'm Doro.
Be well.